That meeting in the Oval Office between Trump, Vance, and Zelensky was an unmitigated success. Stick with me here. Let's think about this. From the perspective of the Western world and democracies, that meeting was a complete disaster. But from the perspective of the people who own Trump and the Trump administration, primarily the Russians and secondarily the Chinese, that was an unmitigated success. Here's what I mean. What's in the best interest of China and of Russia? The best interest of China and Russia is a United States that is increasingly isolated and is lacking in significant allies. So if you want to push that goal forward, what do? You install somebody into the office who is aligned with your goals, and they will actively and deliberately do anything and everything possible to remove the U.S. from the global stage. When you think about that meeting with Zelensky, what did Trump and Vance accomplish? They accomplished the goal of communicating to the broader world that the U.S. is an unreliable ally and cannot be trusted. Now, we can all say that was always the case, or at least there was always suspicion of that being the case anyways. This removes all doubt. And from a Russian perspective, Russia's goal is to dominate over Europe. In order for Russia to accomplish that goal, what do they need to do? They need to remove the biggest player in NATO off the board. And then they can tackle each of those European states individually because Europe is not united in any formal sense, at least at this point. So how do you accomplish that? You destabilize and destroy the U.S. from within, utilizing one of your long-held assets to do the job for you. And you have that asset act as your proxy in the Western Hemisphere, and you have that proxy destabilize and isolate the U.S. from any support across the European continent. And that was mission accomplished. From a China perspective, what do you want to accomplish? Again, you want to isolate the U.S., but China has its own interests. China wants dominance over Asia. So if you want the U.S. to retreat from the Asia sphere of influence, you do the same thing. You do whatever you can to make sure that the U.S. is communicating to its allies that those allies cannot trust the U.S. So when it comes to Japan, when it comes to Taiwan, when it comes to Australia, when it comes to India, all of those countries in the Asian sphere got the message. And those countries have their own interests. And what are they going to do? They're going to look to solidify their own interests and build new alliances that insulate them from potential damage from a rising China. So from a Chinese perspective and a Russian perspective, that was mission accomplished. What we are seeing right now is the systematic dismantling of every structure and institution that the U.S. stands for, thanks to the Russian assets that are in place all across the Trump administration, starting with the top. When presidents take the oath of office, they vow to support and defend the Constitution from enemies abroad and from enemies within. What we have right now in the Oval Office, at the top of the food chain, is an enemy within. This is where all of us need to come to the realization that what is happening in the Oval Office right now is a complete rejection of democratic principles of freedom and liberty. And the person at the top of the food chain and all of his cohorts, what they're trying to do is usher in an isolated dictatorship, a hermit kingdom. That is what's going on, and it's being carried out on the orders of Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping.